Has amplifier technology finally evolved? The future of amplifiers may have just arrived. And no, this amplifier doesn't come with a flux capacitor. Unlike the DeLorean, it doesn't need 88 miles per hour to travel into the future. It just needs gallium nitride transistors, or GaN, as it's more commonly known, which admittedly sounds a lot less cool than a flux capacitor. But after spending the last few weeks with it, I'm not entirely convinced it didn't arrive here from 2055. Has amplifier technology finally evolved? Or is GaN just another marketing buzzword designed to separate audiophiles from their hard-earned money? Let's find out. This is the HiFi Rose RA280. One of the biggest talking points surrounding the RA280 is undoubtedly its use of GaN transistors. Let's quickly understand what all the fuss is about. Interestingly, the technology that many believe could revolutionize high-end audio wasn't developed for music at all. GaN, or gallium nitride, emerged from advanced semiconductor research. Its original applications included radar systems, telecommunications infrastructure, satellites, and high-frequency RF systems. Later, it found its way into power electronics and fast chargers. Compared to traditional silicon devices, GaN transistors can switch significantly faster, waste less energy, and generate less heat. For Class D amplification, those characteristics are extremely valuable. Higher switching speeds can potentially reduce distortion, improve transient response, and allow the output filter to become more transparent. In theory, at least, this could be one of the technologies that finally allows Class D amplification to compete with the very best traditional amplifier design. It's also worth talking about something that has followed Class D amplification for decades: its reputation. For many audiophiles, Class D has always been associated with words like clinical, dry, sterile, harsh, technically impressive perhaps, but not necessarily musical. Now, to be fair, modern Class D designs have improved enormously over the years. Yet many enthusiasts still gravitate towards Class A, Class AB, or even tube amplifiers when searching for the ultimate listening experience. And honestly, I understand why. Because many early Class D amplifiers did have limitations. The technology made enormous sense on paper: high efficiency, low heat, compact size, plenty of power, but sometimes the listening experience didn't quite convince traditional audiophiles. Which brings us back to the RA280. Because what makes this amplifier interesting isn't simply that it's Class D. We've seen Class D before. The real question is whether GaN technology finally allows Class D to fulfill the promise it has been making for years, a promise of combining efficiency with genuine high-end sound quality. And after spending time with the RA280, I can't help wondering whether this might represent a genuine turning point. Not necessarily the end of Class AB, not the end of tubes, but perhaps the beginning of a new chapter, where Class D is no longer viewed as the compromise option, but as a legitimate high-end alternative. Interestingly, HiFi Rose isn't alone in this belief. One of the pioneers of GaN amplification was AGD Productions, an American high-end audio company led by Italian engineer Alberto Guerra. Long before GaN became a fashionable buzzword in audio circles, AGD was already building ultra-high-end amplifiers around this technology. Their argument was simple: if GaN could transform telecommunications, industrial electronics, and military applications, why couldn't it transform audio too? Listening to the RA280, I'm beginning to think they may have been onto something. The HiFi Rose RA280 certainly doesn't look like a conventional amplifier. Its retro-inspired front panel combines analog-style view meters with a futuristic industrial design that immediately stands out from the crowd. One interesting detail is that the view meters don't actually display output power. Instead, they display the incoming signal level at the preamplifier stage. Around the back, the RA280 offers multiple analog inputs, including balance, XLR connectivity, a moving magnet phonostage for vinyl enthusiasts, and a dedicated subwoofer output. The remote control is fairly minimalist, providing only the essential functions: power, volume, and mute. Although pressing the mute button reveals a charming little surprise. The sound disappears, as expected, but the view meters begin flashing as if the amplifier is patiently waiting for permission to start playing again. A small touch, but one that adds personality. I would have liked to see input selection included as well. Now, perhaps HiFi Rose had their reasons. Maybe it's related to the way the input switching is implemented internally, or maybe they simply wanted to keep the remote as clean and simple as possible. Either way, if you regularly switch between multiple sources, you'll still need to get up from the sofa every now and then. Think of it as a built-in exercise. One thing I particularly enjoyed about the RA280 is the attention paid to small user experience details. For example, the amplifier allows you to adjust the illumination level of both the front panel and the view meters. At setting 0, the lighting becomes extremely subtle, perfect for late-night listening sessions in a dark room. At the highest setting, the view meters and front panel illumination become far more prominent, giving the amplifier an even stronger visual presence. It's a small feature, but one that many enthusiasts will appreciate. Another feature that immediately caught my attention is the inclusion of traditional bass and treble tone controls. Now, before the purists start reaching for the comment section, HiFi Rose had thought about that too. The tone controls can be completely bypassed from the signal path. And this is where another clever design touch appears. When the tone controls are active, their controls remain illuminated just like the rest of the amplifier. The moment you engage bypass mode, the illumination around the bass and treble controls disappears. It's a simple but highly effective visual indication that the tone circuit has been removed from the signal path. Even from across the room, you instantly know whether you're listening with the tone controls engaged or bypassed. It's one of those thoughtful little details that suggests this amplifier was designed by people who actually use hi-fi equipment themselves. Another practical feature worth mentioning is the automatic standby function. If the amplifier does not detect an incoming signal for a period of time, it automatically powers down. A useful feature for anyone who occasionally forgets to switch their equipment off after a listening session. Now let's get to the important part. How does it actually sound? And I'll start with the thing that surprised me the most: the treble. Not the bass, not the soundstage, not even the detail retrieval, the treble. I've heard at least one highly respected reviewer describe the RA280's top end as slightly rounded. Honestly, that's not what I'm hearing at all. In my system, the word rounded simply doesn't fit. If anything, I'd describe the opposite. This amplifier delivers some of the most extended, energetic, and revealing treble I've heard in a long time. My Tannoy TD12s are naturally on the darker side of neutral. Yet, through the RA280, it almost felt as though someone had secretly installed new tweeters. Subtle vocal inflections, the trailing edges of words, tiny details buried deep inside recordings. Everything became easier to hear. And that's where the first major strength of this amplifier becomes obvious: speed. The RA280 is astonishingly fast. Transient attacks arrive with a sense of immediacy that constantly grabs your attention. Notes start and stop with remarkable precision. There is a cleanliness to the presentation that makes many amplifiers sound slightly blurred by comparison. This speed translates directly into imaging and separation. The stereo image is exceptionally focused. Individual sounds occupy clearly defined positions. Voices tend to separate themselves from the rest of the mix in a very convincing way. One of the tracks I used was Bubbles by Yoshi Urikawa, a recording that many audiophiles know extremely well. And honestly, the RA280 scattered those little bouncing balls all over my room. I've spent the last month finding them everywhere. In fact, here's another one. Jokes aside, this was probably the best reproduction of that track I've ever heard in my system. The sense of space, precision, and placement was simply outstanding. Moving down into the mid-range, the presentation remains quick and direct. It's not a lush or romantic sounding amplifier, nor is it recessed. Instead, voices and instruments are presented with a sense of immediacy that feels engaging and alive. As for the bass, this is not the deepest bass I've ever heard. It doesn't descend into the depths of hell and shake the foundations of the earth. What it does deliver is impact, fast, dry, highly controlled impact. The closest comparison I can make is a live concert. That sensation of bass hitting you in the chest, not exaggerated, not bloated, just powerful, controlled, and extremely satisfying. Overall, the tonal balance leans slightly towards the dry side rather than the warm side, yet somehow it manages to remain smooth. The RA280 has a habit of digging deep into recordings and uncovering tiny details. Some of them fascinating, some of them beautiful, and some of them were probably hidden there for a very good reason. The soundstage is impressively wide and exceptionally well focused. Music emerges from a very dark background, with virtually no sense of strain or distortion. Compared to my own pre-power setup, which costs almost twice as much, I still hear greater depth in my reference system. However, the RA280 counters with superior resolution and image precision. Given the price difference, that's an impressive achievement. During the review period, I was also comparing two loudspeakers that had recently been through the HiFi Room listening room, the EPOS ES7N and the PMC Prodigy One. Going in, I was convinced the EPOS would be the better match. On paper, it made perfect sense. The RA280 is incredibly fast, highly revealing, and exceptionally clean sounding. The EPOS brings a more organic and slightly richer presentation. I assumed the two would complement each other beautifully, but that's not what happened. The real surprise came from the PMC Prodigy One. Somehow, the speed of the Rose and the precision of the PMC simply clicked. Imaging became incredibly precise. Instrument separation improved even further. Details emerged effortlessly from the mix. Most importantly, despite all that resolution, the sound never became fatiguing. It was one of those rare combinations where everything just falls into place. If the PMC Prodigy One surprised me, the Tannoy Dimension TD12 confirmed many of the qualities I was already hearing. Being a large, full-range design equipped with a highly revealing super tweeter, the TD12 allowed the RA280 to show exactly what it is capable of. The amplifier never sounded short of power, it never sounded strained, control was excellent, but what really stood out was once again the top end. The combination of the RA280's speed and the TD12's revealing nature brought an extraordinary sense of openness and air to the recordings. Small vocal inflections, delicate cymbal work, tiny ambient cues hidden deep inside the recording. Everything became easier to follow. In many ways, the Tannoys acted almost like a magnifying glass for the strengths of the Rose. So, has amplifier technology finally evolved? After spending several weeks with the HiFi Rose RA280, I believe the answer is yes. Not because it rewrites the laws of physics, not because every class A, B or tube amplifier suddenly became obsolete? And certainly not because GaN is some kind of magic ingredient, but because, for the first time in a long time, I found myself listening to an amplifier that genuinely felt different. The speed, the transient response, the precision of the imaging, the remarkable sense of clarity, and that astonishing treble performance. And above all, the way it reveals the smallest details hidden inside familiar recordings. The HiFi Rose RA280 won't be the perfect amplifier for everyone. If you're looking for a warm, lush, and romantic presentation, there are certainly other options worth considering. But if you value speed, precision, control, and a level of transparency that constantly encourages you to rediscover your music collection, this amplifier deserves your attention. For years, Class D has been treated by many audiophiles as the promising technology that never quite fulfilled its promise. The RA280 makes me wonder if that is finally starting to change. And perhaps that's the most impressive thing about it. Not that it sounds like the future, but that it makes the future sound believable. And if that's the future of HiFi amplification, it's a future I'm very happy to listen to. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.